Hello, SPD 200. The purpose of this video is to review some aspects of RTI and its application to students in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We'll look at, in this video, a class profile and how we make decisions and considerations for students that are showing skill deficits in reading, writing, math, and behavior. And we'll also go over some of the expectations for your PowerPoint that you need to know. That is an assignment in topic 2 that will assess your learning on all of these objectives. So the last time that we were together, if you were in an in-person class or if you've watched one of the videos I made, we reviewed RTI and MTSS, that's response to intervention and multi-tiered systems and supports, and how all of those decisions are made by a child study team. You're never alone. You have an entire team of teachers that will help you identify students that may need more support. And they will also help you develop the interventions that you need to implement, as well as helping you find ways to monitor their progress. Today, we're going to talk more about data collection, how we collect data on students and how often, and also how we take that data to place students across the tiers. So how will you know? How will you know a student is behind? Sometimes it won't be obvious. Many students have highly developed coping mechanisms to make it seem like they know how to read, write, and do grade level math problems, when in fact they are deeply struggling. Some of these coping mechanisms that students have developed are could look like perfectionism. Students can look like they're highly organized. They turn in all of their assignments, when in reality you find out they're staying up till 11 o'clock at night reading and rereading passages because it's very difficult for them, or maybe they read at a slower rate, so it takes them a very long time to complete assignments. Or maybe they have such deficits in math that they are needing to take several hours to complete one math worksheet. Also, students have other coping mechanisms that look more like a behavior problem. Some students will do anything they can to avoid a task. Maybe that's talking to a friend sitting next to them, or getting up to get a drink of water frequently. And so that task avoidance may be less likely due to the fact that they have a motivational issue, and more to do with the fact that they have skill deficits, and that the activities you're presenting to them to complete in class are difficult for them. So how do we find the students who have these coping mechanisms in place and determine if they actually do in fact have skill gaps? Well, right in your book, the textbook that we use for this class, it's that very first textbook that is in your topic resources in chapter 7. It does discuss the entire RTI process with one area in particular. It says on page 158, table 7.2, there is an entire table of assessments that we use across K through 12 settings that will assess students in reading, writing, and math to determine if there are skill gaps. One of the major assessments that we use in a K through 5 setting is called DIBELS. It stands for the Dynamic Indicator of Basic Early Learning Skills. And this assessment assesses in a variety of areas that I'll talk about in the next slide. If your school does not use DIBELS, that's the name brand for this particular assessment, they most likely use a different assessment that covers the same exact areas of reading, but it's called a different name. So DIBELS assesses reading, and why teachers like this assessment procedure is typically they are short 1 to 3 minute measures, so you can measure students' progress in a variety of reading areas in a very small amount of time. And with these battery of tests, it will give you very useful information if students are at risk for being behind in reading. Also, if students are showing that they're at risk for several semesters at a time, we use that data to as data to support the need for an evaluation for special education if they're continuing to be at risk despite interventions from their from teachers. So if you are a K through 6th grade teacher, you will most likely be using either DIBELS, the name brand for this assessment, or a different assessment by a different name that measures the same reading areas about 4 times a year. Some schools do administer DIBELS weekly. I've been in schools where we do that weekly, and typical schools will do this about 4 times a year. We use DIBELS so often across the nation that you'll hear teachers referring to it as DIBELS, or today we are dibbling. Have you dibbled that student? And so we use that word as a noun, a verb, it's so many things because we are talking about DIBELS so often in schools. Now I'm going to link up a self-paced version of these slides so that you can review the slides, and feel free to watch this video. It is a video of a student. It looks like he's in about 1st grade, and he is receiving the DIBELS exam. He's being dibbled, and this teacher here is his 1st grade teacher. She's dibbling him, and you can see the pace of the exam, the types of questions that are asked, and get a feel for what that assessment looks like. Here's a picture of one of the assessments that we use in assessing reading, whether it be DIBELS or any other assessment that we use to measure reading skills, and it is a nonsense word test. Now, the reason we use nonsense words is because students who have been identified with dyslexia, a hallmark of dyslexia is average to above average IQ. So if average is 100, a hallmark of dyslexia is it's very common for students to have an intelligence quotient or IQ of 110, 120, all the way up to 130, 140, very high IQ profiles, which makes them very excellent word memorizers. They can memorize the look by sight of thousands and thousands of words, which is a great strategy to memorize words. Unfortunately, students, when they have dyslexia and they lack that phonemic awareness foundation, if they come across a word they haven't memorized, they will not know it. They will not know how to sound it out. And so this assessment will measure if they have that phonemic awareness skill. And also it's an indicator of dyslexia if they don't. When they go to receive intervention services, we'll be remediating in all those phonics and phonemic awareness skills. Now, once a student has been assessed using a reading exam, you'll get data. You'll put the assessment results into a computer. So many things are computer generated these days. And right on your computer will generate results of students who are at risk, if they have a low risk, if they're right at grade level. And you can use that data to guide decision-making about who is placed in which tier. Some students look like they're doing great. They're right here in this green zone of having all the skills they need. There's quite a few students who need support in this area. It does not mean that they need special education. It does look like this is a very fragile skill. Maybe it's been newly introduced. That looks like they're in kindergarten. So maybe this is a skill that's been newly introduced. Perhaps this is a Title I area in which students will be more behind than in more affluent schools. And so using all of that information and knowledge to guide decision-making. Now, if a student is behind, according to the progress monitoring and assessments that we use, and they're showing that they're at risk and not proficient in some of these reading areas, we do use factors to determine reasons before we place them in the tiers. So one factor we consider is this student an English language learner? Is there reading delays due to the fact that they don't speak the language that they're supposed to be reading in? If that's the case, if English is their second language, if it's their the language most often spoken at home or their primary language. That is something that the child study team needs to decide when deciding if the student needs ELL services or do they need reading services or do they need both. Having both is okay too. You'll also want to consider with the child study team, do they already have a 504 plan? Do they already have an IEP plan? If that's the case, do we need to ramp up the minutes in the IEP plan? Do they need more support because they're showing a decline in some of these skills? Or are they now progressing and they're in a green zone and they need less support? All of those decisions are made based on data we collect by teacher observation, class work samples, and the data from assessments. The third thing we consider is socioeconomic status. Is the student being provided adequate nutrition? Are basic needs being met at home? If the student is getting no sleep, maybe they're in a shelter and they're not having breakfast in the morning, can we really use data on a test they took on an empty stomach with no sleep to determine their progress in reading? So making sure that you're working with your school if a student has been identified as being, if there's anything like homelessness or socioeconomic status in which those students' basic needs are not being met, talking with your school about resources for that student. Talk with the child study team if perhaps a test was taken on a bad day. You heard that the family dog maybe ran away the night before and that student was, very emotional when they were taking the test. That would be important information for the team to know. You'll want to discourage any conversation if it goes towards calling that student lazy or maybe pointing to the fact that they just don't care, or maybe the parents aren't doing a great job raising them. If the conversation goes towards that direction, you'll want to be a leader. I've had to do it myself. It's not comfortable, but it is necessary to say, at this point, I'm going to ask us to turn the conversation back to positive, back to making decisions and data-driven decisions. Let's go back to the data. Let's go back to some different things that we can try for that student to make things work, avoiding labeling students. And that would be a good way of handling that. You'll want to uphold the culture of assuming the goodwill of that student and guiding the direction of conversation back towards the data, back towards strategies to brainstorm that student's future success. So all decisions are a team decision. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach. One child study team might decide that a student needs tier 3 interventions. Another child study team might decide that that student will stay in tier 2 for a little longer. And it's really based on the decision of the team, and there is no bad decision. You can change your mind at any point along those tiers. Okay, so we've talked about RTI and data collection. We've talked right now we're going to talk about student placement factors. We spoke a little bit about socioeconomic status, ELL status, having a bad day, and we're going to apply that now in your to your class profile. So at the bottom of the assignment, you will see a class profile list with class profiles for almost all of the grades I noticed are present, K all the way through 12. There are a few that are missing, and so you will want to align with the grade level that's closest to your projected program of study of where you would like to end up. And so when you get that grade level profile, it'll look just like this. This 4th grade profile looks similar to the 12th grade one. It has the same data. It has the student's name. It has their English language proficiency, their socioeconomic status, their home language, whether or not a student has a 504 plan, some other information that maybe teacher observation that we need to know, along with their reading level, their math level, and if they have internet at home, if you'd like to assign, that would help if you were going to assign some homework that was relevant to the intervention, if they can complete that at home. Now, of course, we know that we cannot provide interventions before or after school. It does have to stay within their school day. We can't say, you're behind in school, you're behind in reading, so you have more school. That wouldn't be fair. That would be cruel. It is actually illegal to require that. You have to find time for interventions right inside that school, those school hours. And typically what that looks like is a general ed teacher will provide independent learning time for the class. And then while students are doing independent learning activities, that general ed teacher will take students to the back to a horseshoe table or a long table to provide individualized intervention support to students that need it. So let's take a look here. We have Adam is our first student, and he has an English language learner level of 1. It looks like 1 is pre-emergent. So if we're looking at this guide here, and this is at these guides, these ELL levels and the Lexile levels are at the end of your class profile. It's like a little key that will help you make decisions. So since he's a 1, we know that he has very low English language skills in both reading, speaking, and writing. English is not something that he is fluent in. He's typically it takes students about 2 to 5 years to gain proficiency in a second language. So he still has probably 2 to 5 years to get proficient in English. Well, knowing that he does not have an IEP plan, he's not identified as someone with disabled, he is someone that does not speak English. Let's look at his reading level. So his reading level is at a 380. When we look here at his Lexile level, and that stands for reading level, it is considered grade level to be between a 635 and a 950. And he's at 380. I also noticed that he's behind in math. He's below grade level in math, according to the last progress monitoring they did. Now the child study team has a decision to make, and you're going to make decisions different from other people in the class, depending on, you just need a rationale. And so some people might decide that his reading level is so low, he needs to be put in tier 2 reading because he is showing this skill gap. Other students might feel like since he has an English language learner level of 1, it would be time better well served to provide him ELL services, which is a whole different tiered system. Some people might decide he needs reading services and ELL services. Both are perfect decisions, or all 3 are perfect decisions. When you're doing your slides, if you use Adam as an example as to considerations, you will want to have what you determined, and then also you'll want to have a rationale as to why you made that determination. That's what I'm looking for. I may not agree with you, and that's definitely okay. We don't have to agree. It's hard to get not everyone will feel the same way about how a student is best served. But if you have a rationale, I'm going to lean towards your rationale and trust in your judgment and know that that is a good decision for that child study team. Now, when it comes to math, he's below grade level in math. And again, you're going to need to provide a rationale. Some people might think his English language abilities might be impacting him in reading directions for math problems, or maybe it's story problems that's causing him to be behind. He can't speak the language, which is impacting his ability to access his math curriculum. So he might stay in green for reading and math and be provided English language supports. Maybe he goes to tier 2 in reading and math, and he's also provided with English language supports. And every decision you make is the right decision as long as you have a rationale to justify it. Now let's look at Kyle. So Kyle has he has proficient English language skills. So English is his primary language. No IEPs. It looks like he is right on the cusp here for reading. So he's at his 635, and that's kind of that emerging into the what's considered typical for fourth grade. That's another team decision. You may decide that he needs reading support because he's just a little too close to being in that at-risk range, or you might decide he made it to the to where's grade level. He can be provided with general education supports at this time and continue to make progress. Completely up to the child study team. You'll want to just provide a rationale, and it will look different for everyone. I should say you'll go through your entire class profile, identify about 5 standout students that have difficulties in reading or math. Perhaps they have a low socioeconomic status. Perhaps they have English language differences, and identify those students in your slides and the considerations that you made when placing them across the tiers. So at this point, you should have a lot of your slides, an idea for what you would like to do for your slides. I'm going to do one last video before the end of this topic to assist you in developing slides for interventions. That will be really important, and any other considerations that we need to include in your slide deck. So right now, you need a title slide. Feel free to do an objective slide that shares all of the information you will cover in your slide deck. You'll want 2 to 3 slides on the RTI framework, including tiers, the child study team. You'll want a slide on assessments in the K through 5 setting, as well as assessments in the 6 through 8 setting. And all that information can come from Chapter 7, page 158, that list of assessments that are in a little box, a text box on that page. You'll also want to have 2 to 3 slides with explanation of factors in determining reasons for placement, and tying examples from your class profile to this information. You can add to your reference page. So far in this class, we have used the book and some other RTI framework websites that you feel free to use as long as they are peer-reviewed and they're notable websites. You'll want to make sure that you have in-text citations and presenters' notes. So you'll follow the 6x6 slide rule, 6 bullet points with 6 words per bullet point, and then be sure to include all of your examples, explanations, things that you want to emphasize in those slide notes. Let's see, that's the last slide that I have for you. Please reach out an email if you have any questions, or Halo. Halo works great for me. I'm here to support you through this entire process of understanding this. I have one more really important video that I'm going to upload at the beginning of next week that will make this a very easy process in creating your slide deck. And reach out if you have any questions along the way. We'll chat soon. Thanks. Bye.